Guys, we just got done watching the 20-minute gameplay demo of Elden Ring, and man, it doesn't even seem real. This is one of those games that truly seems too good to be true, but it is true. And I just gotta say, thank you to Bandai Namco for this amazing showcase. But I don't want to waste too much time with this video. We're going to be breaking down the biggest things to take away from this gameplay trailer. Now, we're not going to go super in-depth frame by frame. You can expect to have plenty of those videos coming in the future. But really quickly, before we start breaking this down, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button if you're hyped for Elden Ring as much as I am. This channel is going to be your one-stop shop for all things Elden Ring. But now, let's break this down. Our gameplay demo starts with our first look at the official in-game Lands Between. And let me just say, the Erd Tree looks absolutely fantastic. Now, they did specify that this gameplay was running on PC, likely on ultra high settings, but I don't want to hear anybody complaining about the graphics because this place is beautiful. Off to the left right there, you can notice an NPC that we've seen several times before. We don't know much about them, but if you remember from the Summer Games Fest trailer, the player can be seen kneeling to this character over in the swamp. Now, they don't stop to talk, but the next thing we see is interesting. We can see two corpses hung on these crucifixes that resemble the Elden Ring logo off to the side, and an animal that the player almost hits. We get a look at a cart caravan as well as some squirrels playing on the ground, and we'll talk more about that later. But without wasting any time, we get straight into the Wyvern Fight, and this is our first look at a field boss. And I gotta say, this looks like a fun fight. It really resembles the King of the Storm fight, but without the nameless king on top. We get a new look at a spell that summons a bow with 4 arrows and fires them all like soul spears with tracking, and I gotta say that magic looks like it's gonna be very viable. But we can assume this is gonna be a pretty early game boss, since the player gets there right after making it to the Lands Between. And I really love the seamless transition between horseback combat and standing combat. I think they did a great job of making it very satisfying. Our next big point of interest is our first look at our pot boy, Alexander. Now we know there's going to be several different pot boys around the world, both big and small, but this dude is huge. You'll notice the Erd Tree embroidery on top of his lid, and we'll talk about that in another video, but I had no idea these guys were going to actually be NPCs. But we can help out our friend Alexander here by freeing him from this hole he found himself stuck in. Now, we don't know if all pot boys are going to be NPCs or if they're all friendly or not, but I'm interested to see what his storyline is going to be like. That we then get a good look at our map, which is probably going to be the most important thing we see all day. And this map could warrant an entire video on its own, and I'll probably have that video out next week. But let's go ahead and highlight a few points of interest that we haven't seen yet. And really quick, shout out to Maxzilla over on Reddit for compiling this stitch together of the map we've seen so far. One thing you might notice is that there's lots of areas surrounded by water, and we don't yet know if swimming is going to be part of the game, but my guess is that since our Yackle is based off the Celtic myth of the spirit horse crossing the Sea of Fog, I'm going to assume that it can walk on water. There's also these golden circles with a wisp coming from them, and there might be sites of lost grace, but I'm not sure yet. We can see the two miniature Erd trees in this area of this castle that the player was standing at. That's all I want to say for the map right now. We'll talk about that more in a later video. After that, we get a shot of the player jumping up one of these spirit springs, and man, does this view look amazing. The way they executed on the Erd tree is just phenomenal. The next big point of interest is our player scouting out this area of enemies down below from this cliffside. We can see them pull out a telescope and see the formations of the enemies down below. It's very reminiscent of Sekiro. But after the player's done scouting the enemies, we get a look at the menu, and our first look at all the stats. Reading from top to bottom, we have Vigor, Mind, Endurance, Strength, Dexterity, Intelligence, Faith, and Arcane. I find it interesting that we have Mind, Intelligence, and Arcane, and I'm not sure what the difference in those is going to be yet, but now we can take a good look at our crafting menu. We see several items on there like throwing knives, fire bombs, and different types of arrows, which we get to see in action here when the player shoots this enemy with a sleep arrow and is able to go up and perform a death blow on him. During this next action scene, we get to see a lot of new weapons and skills in action, such as this new greatsword that looks a lot like the Murakumo. The riposte animation seems to be the same as the one in Dark Souls 3. The player then switches to the short sword that can shoot wind blasts from it, but it's this next skill we get to see on this sword that really sells it for me. This backflip into a quick step forward looks absolutely awesome. The player then goes straight into looting the cart, so I guess all the enemies don't have to be dead for you to loot it, just not aggroed. We then get to see this new spirit summon ability with 5 of these little mini enemies that look absolutely insane. but they make quick work of these other guys. I can't stress enough how beautiful the scenery in this game looks. This autumn themed area is breathtaking, and the scale of it is just huge. The map of Elden Ring is a lot bigger than I thought it'd be, and this shot of them crouching through the forest really drives that home. We can see the big cloak Cthulhu looking guys, and we've talked about them a lot in the past, so I'm gonna pass on talking about them for now. But then we get a look at a new field boss, and there is a lot to break down in this fight, but first I want to note that that does not appear to be Stormveil Castle in the background. To me, it looks like it takes place in another legacy dungeon altogether. And if you look off to the right here, you can see these little statues next to the rocks, and one of them is making the shape of the crucifix that we saw at the beginning and has this sort of blue astral glow to it. Now, I have no idea what that is. It could be connected to the spirit summoning statues that we've seen in the past, but as of right now, I don't know. We then see this next spell that's very similar to Aldrich's power that looks like it's going to deal a lot of damage. Now, this boss fights very wildly, and he uses this red lightning that we've seen on the dragon, and I really want to find out what the meaning behind that is. We can also see the Phantom in the back pull out a wyvern head and shoot fire from it, kind of like the one in Dark Souls 3. I'm going to skip over the dungeon section because there's nothing really new in that, but now I want to move on to our first look at Melina. And in the past, I had thought the reason her eye was closed was because of a rot, but we can now see when she shows her face that it's a tattoo that seals her eye instead of a rot. And then we hear the famous line, tarnished from beyond the fog, I am Melina, I offer you an accord. Now, I've done a video in the past breaking down everything we know about Melina so far, and after some information that dropped this morning, that video is in need of an update. We know Melina is going to serve as our firekeeper and be the place that we can level up at, but we also know that she has some ulterior motives in helping us, and it's going to be very interesting to figure out what that is and whether or not we can trust her. Her tattoo is very interesting too. It looks like either some sort of skeletal hand or a dragon's wing, and there's some very interesting lore implications that are hinted at the end of this trailer, which if it is one of the things we just suspected, there could be a very big reason not to trust Melina. The next chapter of the gameplay preview takes us into Stormveil Castle, and this sequence has been told to us before through VaatiVidya and Fextra Life, where we're met by a fork in the road to either go directly through the gate of Stormveil Castle, or scale the side of it to sneak our way in. And this NPC here presents these options to us. Now, this whole scene of traversing Stormveil is deserving of a video on its own, so we're not going to go too deep into it here, but after a while we come across this next NPC, who's wearing a very wide-brimmed hat that I'm sure triggered a lot of memories in all of us. And he tells us that he's a sorcerer and his name is Rogier. He's looking for something in the castle, but he gives us a warning. He tells us that the castle is full of tarnished hunters. There's something very interesting in this room. Take a look at that statue at the back. It's very reminiscent of something else in Stormveil Castle that's going to be coming in the next video. After our meeting with Rogier, we get to see a fight with what I can only assume is a tarnished hunter. They have this giant hawk with them, and move very similarly to the Lothric Knights in Dark Souls 3. We also get to see the parry in action here, and it resembles Dark Souls 1 a lot to me. But after this fight, we finally get to lay eyes on the thing everybody was waiting for, our big battle with Godrik the Golden.
Mighty dragon, thou'rt a true-born heir. Lend me thy strength, O kindred. Deliver me unto greater heights. Well, as a lord, I command thee, kneel! I am the lord of all that is golden.
Now, aside from the millions of lore implications that cutscene just had, Godrik looks like an insane boss fight, and right when we get into it, we can see the player character buff with some kind of red spell. Now, we don't know if bleed is going to be part of the game, but given that we've seen red lightning and a red sky before, I assume it's connected to that. We then get to see a new spirit summon, a big golem with a flail, with a helmet that kind of looks like a Katarina Knight. As for Godrik himself, He fights wildly, kinda like Gale, and we get to see the player use this giant soul greatsword, and it's the same one we saw from the Summer Games Fest trailer. But what's interesting is that we get to see the player use that spell and a skill all on the same weapon, so it implies to me that spells and skills are going to be interchangeable all without changing your weapon. Overall, I was extremely impressed with this gameplay preview, and obviously there is still a ton to break down in this. And thanks to this demo, I have a lot of new lore theories I can't wait to dive into with you guys. But as for now, that's all of the major stuff that we got to see today. I want to say thank you to everybody that came out to the stream this morning while we watched it. I had a great time talking with you guys, and doing those streams where we can all chat together is always a lot of fun. But guys, I hope you can look forward to all the videos that are going to be coming out of this, but that's going to pretty much do it for part 1 of this breakdown. Please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll catch you in the next one.